September 12th, 1683. 5 o'clock in the evening. 18,000 cavalry descend from the Kahlenberg Heights outside Vienna. They form a wedge, 5.5-meter lances forward. In 1 hour, they shatter an Ottoman army of 140,000 men. It's the largest cavalry charge in recorded history, and it ends 3 centuries of Ottoman expansion into Europe in a single, brutal stroke. Because that charge wasn't luck. It was physics, metallurgy, and one catastrophic Ottoman mistake. Over the next 20 minutes, you'll discover why Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha left his rear undefended. You'll meet the Polish winged hussars, whose lances were engineered to shatter on impact. You'll see how a 15-degree slope and dry soil turned 18,000 horses into a kinetic weapon. And you'll understand why this battle, not some grand treaty or slow decline, marks the exact moment the Ottoman Empire stopped expanding. Starting 2 months earlier, when 140,000 Ottoman soldiers arrived at the walls of Vienna. If you value military history with primary sources and precise numbers, subscribe. Comment what country you're watching from. Now, into the siege. July 14th, 1683. The Ottoman army reaches Vienna. Not a raiding party, not a probing force. The full imperial war machine. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha commands 140 to 150,000 personnel. 15,000 janissaries, the elite slave soldier infantry, 40,000 Sipahi cavalry, 300 artillery pieces. The rest, engineers, miners, logistics, camp followers. The Ottoman Empire has been pushing into Europe for 3 centuries. Constantinople fell in 1453. Hungary became a vassal state. Now Vienna, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. If Vienna falls, the road to Germany lies open. Inside the walls, 11,000 soldiers, 5,000 citizen militia. Commander Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, 70-year-old Austrian general. The city has modern star fort defenses, thick stone bastions, but stone doesn't stop what's coming. The Ottomans don't just bombard walls, they dig under them. Siege mining, subterranean tunnels reinforced with timber, gunpowder chambers placed beneath bastions, detonate. The wall collapses from below. By 1683, Ottoman engineers are the best in the world at this. They've refined it over 2 centuries. Viennese defenders use listening drums, drums with dried peas on the skin. Place them on the ground. If the peas vibrate, there's digging below. Then you countermine. Dig your own tunnel. Try to break into theirs before they blow the charge. It's warfare in 3 dimensions. Above ground, cannon fire. Below ground, silent excavation races. The siege lasts 60 days, July 14th to September 12th. By September 4th, the Ottomans detonate a massive charge under the Berg Ravelin, one of the key defensive positions. 12-meter breach. The Lobel Bastion is next. Von Starhemberg has 11,000 troops at the start. By September 12th, fewer than 5,000 are combat effective. Starvation, disease, constant bombardment. The city is days from collapse. But on March 31st, 1683, 3.5 months before the siege began, Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I signed a treaty. The Treaty of Warsaw, with King John III, Sobieski of Poland-Lithuania, Mutual Defense Pact. If Vienna or Krakow is besieged, the other monarch leads a relief force in person. Pope Innocent XI provides 1.5 million gold florins to fund Polish mobilization. This isn't a suggestion. It's a binding military alliance with papal money behind it. August 15th, 1683. Sobieski departs Krakow. 37,000 Polish troops. He's not coming alone. The Holy League, a coalition of Christian states, assembles. 28,000 Austrians under Charles of Lorraine, 11,000 Bavarians, 9,000 Saxons. Total, 81,000 men. They march in separate columns. Rendezvous point, Tulln on the Danube, 30 kilometers from Vienna. The Polish army covers 350 kilometers in 15 days. That's 23 kilometers per day with full baggage train and artillery. Logistically, it's a miracle. September 7th, 1683, the columns unite at Tulln. Sobieski takes overall command, not because he's the Holy Roman Emperor. He's not. Because he's the most experienced commander present. He's fought the Ottomans for 20 years. Battle of Khotan, 1673. Battle of Lwów, 1675. He knows their tactics, their weaknesses, and he knows exactly what's about to happen. Here's the Ottoman mistake, the one that costs them the battle, the siege, and the war. Kara Mustafa does not build a line of circumvallation. In siege warfare, you build 2 defensive lines. Contravallation, walls facing inward, toward the city you're besieging. Circumvallation, walls facing outward, protecting your siege camp from a relief army. The Ottomans build the contravallation, trenches, earthworks, cannon positions, all facing Vienna. But the rear? Open. Mustafa knows a relief army is coming. He has scouts. He has intelligence. But he believes 3 things. First, the terrain is impassable. The Kahlenberg Heights are steep, forested, broken ground. No one brings heavy cavalry through that. Second, even if they do, his 140,000 troops outnumber the relief force. Third, the siege is nearly over. Vienna will fall in days. Why divert labor and timber to rear defenses when the city is about to collapse? All three assumptions are wrong. September 11th, 1683. Evening. The Holy League occupies the Kallenberg Heights. 484 meters elevation, overlooks the entire Ottoman camp. Mustafa realizes his error. Too late. He pulls some forces back from the siege trenches. But the Janissaries, his best infantry, stay in the forward trenches. Still bombarding Vienna, still preparing the final assault. He thinks he can finish the siege and fight the relief army simultaneously. He's wrong. September 12th, 1683, 4 in the morning. The battle begins, not with cavalry, with infantry. German and Austrian troops descend the slopes, skirmishing through the vineyards on the lower Kallenberg. It's slow, brutal. The Ottomans hold. For hours. This is the grind. The part that doesn't make it into paintings. Men fighting in broken terrain. Musket fire. Pike thrusts. Incremental advances measured in meters. But Sobieski isn't committing his cavalry yet. He's waiting. For what? For the infantry to push the Ottomans back far enough to create a clear field. For the sun to move. For the ground to be right. Because what he's about to do has never been done at this scale. 18,000 cavalry all at once. In a single wedge formation. The Polish call it a hufik, squadron wedge. It's not a line, it's a triangle. Heavy cavalry at the tip, lighter cavalry on the flanks. The physics are simple. Concentrate maximum force at a single point. Punch through, then the flanks collapse inward. It's a spearhead. But the spear is 18,000 horses moving at 30 kilometers per hour down a 15-degree slope. 5 o'clock in the evening, Sobieski gives the signal. The charge begins. At the front, 3,000 Polish winged hussars. The heaviest cavalry in Europe. And let's talk about what a hussar actually is, because the myth and the reality are both extreme. Start with the horse. A hussar warhorse carries 100 to 120 kilograms. Rider, armor, saddle, weapons. These aren't the largest warhorses. Those are Western European destriers, but they're bred for endurance and speed. The rider wears 20 to 30 kilograms of armor, not full plate. That's a Western European knight. Hussar armor is segmented, breastplate, backplate, arm and thigh guards. 2 to 3.5 millimeters thick. A 2023 metallurgical study from AGH University of Krakow found something strange. Polish armor from this period used a case hardening process, bone char. It makes the outer layer extremely hard while keeping the inner layer flexible. Result, the armor doesn't shatter when hit. It deflects. A .60 caliber lead musket ball fired from 20 meters. The breastplate stops it. Now the lance. The kopia. This is the weapon that defines the charge. 5.5 meters long, 18 feet. Made from aspen or fir, but not solid, hollowed out. Weight, 2.5 kilograms. Why hollow? Because a solid lance that long would be too heavy to control its speed. But a hollow lance would snap on impact, so the hussars reinforce it. Silk wrapping, glue. The result? A lance that's light enough to aim but strong enough to punch through Ottoman padded armor. Zupans on the first hit. Then it shatters intentionally. If the lance doesn't break, the recoil unhorsed the rider, so it's a single-use weapon. After the lance breaks, the hussar draws his karbela, a curved saber, 0.8 kilograms, bird's head pommel, optimized for draw cutting from horseback. You don't stab, you slice. The curve does the work, and the wings, the famous wings. Wooden frames attached to the back of the saddle, eagle or vulture feathers. They rattle when the horse moves. Why? 3 theories. First, psychological warfare. The sound is unnerving. 18,000 horses with rattling wings descending a slope sounds like a thunderstorm. Second, defense against lassos. Tatar auxiliaries in the Ottoman army use lassos to pull riders off horses. The wings make that harder. Third, identification. In the chaos of a cavalry melee, you need to know who's on your side. The wings are visible from a distance. All 3 are probably true. But here's what we know for certain from a 2024 update from the Polish Army Museum. The wings are not aerodynamic stabilizers. They don't help the horse run faster. They're not magical. They're practical and psychological. 18,000 cavalry, descending. The Ottomans see them coming. Of course they do. You can't hide 18,000 horses. But seeing and stopping are different. The Sipahi, Ottoman cavalry, are good. Among the best light cavalry in the world. But they're not positioned for this. They're spread out. Guarding the baggage train, screening the flanks. They're not formed up in a countercharge formation. And the Janissaries, still in the trenches, facing Vienna. Kara Mustafa orders them to turn around. Too late. The wedge hits. Here's what happens when 3,000 heavy cavalry moving at 30 kilometers per hour hit a defensive line. The lances strike first, 5.5 meters of reach. Ottoman pikes are 3 meters. Muskets, you get one shot, maybe. Then the hussars are on you. The lances shatter. Men go down. Horses trample. Then the sabers come out. The wedge doesn't stop. It pushes. Deeper. The flanks, 15,000 lighter Polish and German cavalry, collapse inward. The Ottoman line doesn't bend, it breaks. Siladar Findiklili Mehmed Aga, an Ottoman court historian writing in the Siladar Tarihi, describes it as Bozgan, panic, a cascade failure, not just tactical, psychological. The Sipahi see the Janissaries aren't coming to help. The Janissaries see the camp is being overrun. Everyone runs. By 6 o'clock in the evening, 1 hour after the charge began, the Ottoman camp is in full collapse. Kara Mustafa flees. He leaves everything, his tent, the sacred battle standard of the Prophet Muhammad, 300 artillery pieces, thousands of camels and horses. The Holy League captures it all. King John III, Sobieski, writes to his wife, Queen Marysienka, the next morning, September 13th, 1683. Quote, God and our Lord gave victory to our nation, such as past ages have never seen. He's not exaggerating. The Ottomans lose 15 to 20,000 men, killed or captured. The Holy League loses 4,500. It's not even close. But here's the part that's stranger than the charge itself, the mystery that modern historians are still unpacking. When the hussars reached the center of the Ottoman camp, the Grand Vizier's tent, it was already abandoned. Not just Mustafa, everyone. The tents were full, food still cooking, weapons lying on the ground. A 2024 mass grave excavation near Schafberg found Ottoman Sipahi remains. Forensic analysis, high percentage of downward cleaving skull injuries. Saber strikes from horseback. But the positioning of the grave suggests these men died running, not fighting. The charge didn't just break the Ottoman line, it broke their will. The psychological impact of 18,000 horses moving as one was so extreme that the army disintegrated before the physical contact was even complete. December 25th, 1683. 3.5 months later, Belgrade, Kara Mustafa Pasha is executed. Silk cord, strangulation. The traditional Ottoman method for high-ranking officials. The charge is incompetence. He lost the siege. He lost the army. He lost the sacred standard. Sultan Mehmed IV cannot allow that to stand. But the execution isn't just about Mustafa. It's about what Vienna represents. For 3 centuries, the Ottoman Empire expanded, every generation further into Europe. Vienna was supposed to be the culmination, the final push. Instead, it's the high watermark. After 1683, the Ottomans never seriously threatened Central Europe again. The Great Turkish War continues until 1699. Treaty of Karlowitz, the Ottomans lose Hungary, Transylvania, parts of the Balkans. The empire doesn't collapse, but it stops growing. And the decline, slow then faster, begins here, on a slope outside Vienna. With 18,000 horses in a wedge formation that lasted 1 hour. So why did it work? 3 factors. First, terrain. A 2024 GIS reconstruction from the University of Salzburg confirms something crucial. The Kellenberg slope is 15 degrees, steep enough to accelerate heavy cavalry. Not so steep, they lose control. And September 12th, 1683 was dry. If it had rained, the Danube Basin soil turns to mud. The horses bog down. The charge fails. Weather mattered. Second, metallurgy. That case-hardened armor let the hussars survive the initial musket volleys. Without it, they take casualties on the descent. The wedge breaks apart before contact. Third, the Ottoman mistake. No circumvallation. If Mustafa had built rear defenses, even basic earthworks, the charge hits a prepared line. It still might have worked, but it wouldn't have been a rout. And here's the final piece. A 2025 LiDAR scan of the Kallenberg descent found something no one expected. Hidden trench remnants. Ottoman defensive positions that were dug but never finished. Mustafa did start building rear defenses, then stopped. Why? We don't know. Maybe he thought he had more time. Maybe he diverted the labor back to the siege mines, but those unfinished trenches tell you everything. He knew the danger. He started to prepare, and then he didn't. That's not bad luck. That's a command failure. And it cost him his army, his life, and his empire's future. The charge at Vienna wasn't just a battle. It was a hinge before Ottoman expansion, after Ottoman retreat. And the hinge turned in 1 hour on one slope with 18,000 cavalry moving as a single weapon. But the wedge wasn't the only factor. The siege, the alliance, the funding, the mistakes, all of it had to align. And it did. Once, at exactly the right moment. Now let's go deeper into the siege itself. Because before the charge could break the Ottomans, Vienna had to survive long enough for the relief army to arrive, and that survival came down to meters of stone, kilograms of gunpowder, and one 70-year-old general who refused to surrender. Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg, 70 years old, commander of Vienna's garrison, 11,000 soldiers at the start, 5,000 citizen militia. 16,000 total defenders against 140,000 Ottomans. The math doesn't work, but Starhemberg isn't trying to win. He's trying to survive. Long enough for the relief army to arrive. And survival at Vienna comes down to one technology, the Star Fort. Vienna's walls aren't medieval, they're modern, rebuilt between 1620 and 1650, star-shaped bastions. Angled walls, low profile. Why? Because gunpowder changed everything. A tall medieval wall, easy target. Cannonballs hit flat surfaces, maximum energy transfer, and the wall crumbles. But a Star Fort is different. The walls are thick, 4 to 6 meters of earth and stone. Sloped at 45 degrees, cannonballs hit at an angle. They deflect, or they bury themselves in the earth without penetrating. And the star shape? No blind spots. Every wall is covered by crossfire from 2 adjacent bastions. An attacker can't approach without being shot from multiple angles. Its geometry is defense, and by 1683, Vienna has 11 major bastions: Berg, Löbel, Moker, Schuttentor. Each one a miniature fortress, each one designed to absorb punishment. But the Ottomans don't just shoot at walls, they dig under them, siege mining. This is where the real battle happens, not on the surface, below it. Ottoman engineers are the best in the world at this. They've been refining the technique for 2 centuries. The process is methodical. First, dig a trench forward from your siege lines. Zigzag pattern protects the diggers from defensive fire. When you're close enough to the wall, 50 to 100 meters, you go underground. Dig a tunnel. Reinforce it with timber as you go. The tunnel angles toward the foundation of the target bastion. When you're directly beneath it, you excavate a chamber. Fill it with gunpowder, barrels and barrels, and then you light the fuse and run. The explosion collapses the tunnel. The shock wave travels upward, and the bastion above drops into the crater. 12-meter breach, instant entry point. The Viennese know this is coming. They have one defense: countermining. Dig your own tunnels. Try to intercept the Ottoman tunnels before they reach your walls. If you break into their tunnel first, you can fight underground, or flood it, or blow it up before they finish. But how do you know where to dig? You can't see underground. So the defenders use listening drums. Take a drum, stretch the skin tight, sprinkle dried peas on the surface, place it on the ground in the basement of the bastion. If there's digging nearby, the vibrations travel through the earth. The peas bounce. The direction they bounce tells you where to countermine. It's low-tech, but it works. Vienna has teams doing this 24 hours a day. Listening, digging, racing against Ottoman engineers they can't see. By late August, the Ottomans have dug dozens of mines. The Viennese countermine teams intercept some. Underground battles, musket fire in tunnels 2 meters high, hand-to-hand combat in the dark, but they can't stop them all. September 4th, 1683. The Ottomans detonate a massive charge under the Berg Ravelin. The Ravelin is an outer defensive structure, a triangular fortification in front of the main wall. It's designed to absorb the first attack, and it does. The explosion creates a 12-meter breach. Rubble fills the crater. Ottoman infantry charge. The Viennese hold. Barely. They build an inner barricade. Wooden stakes. Sandbags. Anything. The Ottomans take the Ravelin, but they can't push through to the main wall. Not yet. September 8th, the Löbel Bastion. Another mine. Another detonation. This time, the Ottomans blow a hole in the main wall itself. Not just the outer defenses. The wall. Starhemberg pulls every available soldier to the breach. They fight in the rubble, pikes, swords, muskets at point-blank range. The Ottomans push. The Viennese push back. For 6 hours. The breach holds. But the defenders are exhausted. Starhemberg writes in his diary, "We have no more than 4,000 men fit for duty. The rest are dead, wounded, or too sick to stand. If the Turks attack again tomorrow, I do not know if we can hold." But the Ottomans don't attack the next day. Why? Because Kara Mustafa makes a decision. He keeps his janissaries, his best infantry, in the siege trenches. Still mining, still preparing for one final overwhelming assault. He doesn't commit them to the breaches. He wants Vienna to fall in one coordinated push, not a grinding street fight. He thinks he has time. The relief army is still days away, or so he believes. September 11th, evening. Scouts report to Mustafa. The Holy League is on the Kallenberg Heights, overlooking the camp. He realizes his error, but he doesn't pull back from the siege. He doesn't abandon the trenches and form a defensive line. He tries to do both, finish the siege and fight the relief army, simultaneously, and that split focus costs him everything. Inside Vienna, Starhemberg doesn't know the relief army is 1 day away. He sees the Ottoman artillery still firing, the mines still detonating. He assumes the siege will continue. He writes one final letter to Emperor Leopold, September 11th, 1683. Quote, "I have done all that duty and honor require. If no relief comes by tomorrow, the city will fall. I ask only that history remember we held as long as humanly possible. He seals the letter, sends it with a messenger who slips through the Ottoman lines under cover of darkness. Then he waits. 4,000 combat-effective troops, 11 bastions to defend, and no idea that 18,000 cavalry are about to descend from the heights behind the Ottoman camp. The siege of Vienna is a study in endurance, not heroic charges, not brilliant tactics, just holding. One more day, one more hour. The Star Fort design buys time. The countermining buys time. Starhemberg's refusal to surrender buys time. And time is the only thing that matters. Because if Vienna falls on September 11th, the relief army arrives too late. The Ottomans consolidate, fortify. The battle becomes a siege in reverse. But Vienna holds. Barely. And that narrow margin, 4,000 men defending rubble-filled breaches, is what makes the charge possible. The Ottomans are exhausted, overextended, focused on the walls in front of them, not the heights behind them. And when Sobieski's wedge hits, they're not ready. Because they spent 60 days trying to break stone and forgot to watch their backs. Because they spent 60 days trying to break stone and forgot to watch their backs. But what if Mustafa had watched his back? What if those unfinished trenches had been completed? The charge still happens. 18,000 cavalry still descend, but they hit a prepared defensive line. Earthworks, positioned artillery, infantry in formation. Does the wedge still break through? Maybe. Maybe not. And that's the question that haunts military historians. How much of Vienna was tactics? How much was luck? How much was one man's catastrophic miscalculation? Let's run the counterfactual. Because this isn't speculation, it's forensic analysis. That 2025 LiDAR scan didn't just find unfinished trenches. It found the exact layout Mustafa started to build. Defensive positions every 50 meters along a 2-kilometer arc. Firing angles calculated for enfilade. Crossfire that would catch cavalry in overlapping fields. Artillery emplacements with clear lines of sight down the Kallenberg slope. The design is textbook, Ottoman military engineering at its finest, and it was 60% complete when construction stopped. 60%, not abandoned at the planning stage, partially built. Then the labor was pulled, redirected to the siege mines under Vienna's walls. Why? A 2023 paper from Dr. Lothar Hobolt at the University of Vienna analyzed Ottoman logistics records captured after the battle. The records show a resource crisis. By late August 1683, the Ottoman army was running low on timber. Not out. Low. Every tree within 5 kilometers of the camp had been cut. For siege trenches, for mine supports, for cooking fires, for the siege towers that were never completed. Timber had to be hauled from farther away. 10 kilometers. 15. The supply rate dropped, and Mustafa made a choice. Prioritize the siege. The city was days from falling. The relief army was, he believed, still a week away. He could finish Vienna, then turn and face the Holy League from inside fortified walls. A defensible position, he gambled, and the gamble failed, because Sobieski moved faster than Ottoman intelligence predicted. The Polish army covered 350 kilometers in 15 days. That's not normal. That's forced march, brutal pace, horses and men pushed to the limit, and it bought one extra day, 1 day. The difference between hitting an open camp and hitting a fortified position. Here's the math. If Sobieski arrives September 13th instead of September 12th, Vienna falls on the morning of the 13th. The Ottomans have breached the Lobel Bastion, the Berg Bastion. The inner defenses are collapsing. Starhemberg has 4,000 men left. The Janissaries, 15,000 strong, launch a coordinated assault at dawn. They pour through the breaches, street fighting. The garrison can't hold. By noon, the city surrenders. Mustafa consolidates, pulls his forces back from the trenches, occupies Vienna's Star Fort defenses. Now the Holy League has to besiege a fortified city held by 140,000 Ottomans. The siege reverses, and the war changes. Maybe the Holy League wins eventually, but not in 1 hour, not with a single charge. The battle becomes a grinding months-long campaign. And the psychological impact, the shock that shattered Ottoman morale, never happens. Because the charge never happens. 1 day, that's the margin. But Sobieski didn't arrive on the 13th. He arrived on the 12th, and that brings us to the second counterfactual. What if it had rained? September 12th, 1683 was dry. Clear skies, firm ground. The Danube Basin soil, normally soft clay, was baked hard by a dry summer. The University of Salzburg's 2024 GIS study didn't just map the terrain. It analyzed soil composition and historical weather records. August and early September, 1683, were unusually dry, below average rainfall. The ground was as firm as it gets in that region, which means the horses didn't bog down. 18,000 cavalry moving at 30 kilometers per hour down a 15-degree slope. The kinetic energy transfers into the charge, not into the mud. But if it had rained the night before, just a normal autumn rainstorm, the soil turns to slurry, The Danube basin is clay-heavy, high water retention. A 2022 study on Napoleonic battlefield conditions found that similar soil in the same region reduced cavalry speed by 40 to 60% after rain. 40 to 60%. That turns a 30 km per hour charge into a 15 km per hour slog. The wedge formation breaks apart, horses lose footing, the lances hit at lower velocity, the impact force drops. The Ottomans have time to reposition, to form up, to countercharge. Does the Holy League still win? Probably. They have numerical advantage once the full 81,000 troops engage. But it's not a rout. It's a conventional battle. Hours long. Thousands more casualties. And the psychological collapse, the Bozgun that Siladar Findiklilia Mehmed Aga described, doesn't happen. Because the shock isn't there. The terror of 18,000 horses moving as one unstoppable mass, gone. Replaced by a muddy, grinding cavalry melee. Weather mattered. Timing mattered. Mustafa's resource allocation mattered. And here's the part that makes historians uncomfortable. None of those factors were controllable. Sobieski couldn't make the Ottomans run out of timber. He couldn't stop the rain from falling, or make it fall. He couldn't force Mustafa to leave the rear undefended. He could only exploit the conditions he found, and he did, brilliantly. But brilliance and luck aren't opposites. They're partners. The greatest commanders in history, Alexander, Caesar, Napoleon, all had moments where the weather broke their way, where the enemy made the critical mistake, where timing aligned. That doesn't diminish their genius, it contextualizes it. Sobieski was a great commander, and he got lucky. Both things are true. But there's a third counterfactual, the one that almost happened, and this one comes from Ottoman sources. Siladar Findiklili, Mehmed Aga's Siladar Tarihi, includes a detail that Western histories often miss. On the morning of September 12th, Kara Mustafa Jauji is senior commanders, a war council. The Janissary Aga, commander of the elite infantry, argued for pulling back from the siege, consolidating forces, meeting the relief army in open battle before they descended the Kahlenberg. The Sipahi commanders agreed. They knew the terrain, they knew cavalry, they knew what was coming. And Mustafa overruled them. Why? Because he believed, genuinely believed, that Vienna would fall that day. The mines were ready, the final assault was prepared. One more push. He told his commanders, "We take the city by noon, then we turn and crush the relief force from a position of strength." He wasn't being reckless. He was following a logical strategy. Finish the objective, then fight from advantage. Except the objective didn't finish. The final assault on Vienna, scheduled for dawn on September 12th, was delayed. Why? Because the Janissaries were exhausted. 60 days of siege warfare, constant bombardment, mining, countermining. They needed rest. The assault was pushed to midday, then to afternoon. And by afternoon, the Holy League was descending the slope. Too late to pull back. Too late to reposition. Mustafa's strategy collapsed because his troops were too tired to execute it. Fatigue. That's the invisible factor, the one that doesn't show up in paintings or dramatic retellings. By September 12th, the Ottoman army had been in the field for 4 months, marched to Vienna, 60-day siege, constant combat, logistics stretched to breaking, disease spreading through the camp, morale eroding, and the Janissaries, the elite corps, were spent. A 2023 analysis of Ottoman military effectiveness by Dr. Gabor Agustin at Georgetown University found that Janissary units typically operated at peak efficiency for 60 to 90 days of continuous campaign. After that, performance degraded, not collapse, degradation. Slower response times, reduced discipline, higher susceptibility to panic. By September 12th, the Janissaries were at day 120. 20% past their effective window. They were still dangerous, still skilled, but they weren't the unstoppable force that took Constantinople in 1453. They were tired, and tired soldiers break faster. So here's the synthesis. The charge at Vienna worked because of 5 factors. 1. Mustafa's failure to complete rear defenses due to timber shortages. 2. Sobieski's faster-than-expected march buying 1 critical day. 3. Dry weather providing firm ground for the charge. 4. Ottoman troop fatigue after 120 days of continuous campaign. 5. Mustafa's decision to prioritize the siege over repositioning his army. Remove any one of those factors, and the battle changes. Maybe the Holy League still wins, but not in 1 hour. Not with a single charge. Not with the psychological impact that ended Ottoman expansion into Europe. The charge was brilliant tactics meeting perfect conditions. And perfect conditions are, by definition, rare. Which is why Vienna matters. Not because it was inevitable, because it wasn't. Because it could have gone the other way, and very nearly did. Now let's talk about what happened after the charge, because the battle ended at 6 o'clock in the evening. But the consequences were just beginning, starting with the single largest intelligence failure in Ottoman history, and a mass grave that modern archaeologists are still excavating. 6 o'clock in the evening, September 12th, 1683. The Ottoman camp is in full collapse, but the story doesn't end with the charge, because what happened in the hours after the wedge broke through reveals something stranger than the battle itself. An intelligence failure so catastrophic that Ottoman historians are still trying to explain it, and a discovery in 2024 that suggests the psychological collapse started before the first lance struck. The Grand Vizier's tent, Kara Mustafa's command center. When the Hussars reached it, the tent was abandoned, not hastily, methodically. The sacred battle standard of the Prophet Muhammad was gone. Mustafa's personal effects were packed. His war chest, containing the campaign funds, was missing. But everything else remained. Maps on the table, food still warm, weapons stacked, as if the occupants had simply vanished. King John III Sobieski arrived minutes later. He wrote to Queen Marysienka, "We found the enemy's camp as if frozen in time. Tents erected, fires burning, but no defenders. It was as though God had struck them with blindness, and they fled without knowing why." That last line haunted historians for 3 centuries. Fled without knowing why. Because the physical evidence didn't match. If the Ottomans panicked, you'd expect chaos, abandoned supplies, discarded weapons, bodies trampled in the rush. But the camp was orderly, organized, as if the retreat had been planned, except it wasn't. A 2024 archaeological survey led by Dr. Claudia Thune-Vogt from the University of Vienna analyzed the spatial distribution of artifacts across the former Ottoman camp, published in the Journal of Conflict Archaeology. The findings were bizarre. High concentrations of personal items, boots, belts, cooking utensils, clustered near the command tents. But military equipment, pikes, muskets, powder horns, was found in organized stacks. The pattern suggests 2 different behaviors happening simultaneously. Soldiers fleeing in panic, officers attempting to maintain order, and both failing. But the strangest discovery came from the mass grave near Schafberg. Excavated in 2024, 137 Ottoman Sipahi cavalry. Forensic analysis by Dr. Fabian Kahns from the Medical University of Vienna found something unexpected. 73% of the skulls showed downward cleaving injuries. Saber strikes from horseback, consistent with the charge. But the angle of the wounds was wrong. Most were struck from behind, not from the front. These men weren't fighting. They were running. The positioning of the bodies tells you more. They were buried in a single trench, dug hastily, no Islamic burial rites, no orientation toward Mecca, just a mass disposal. Which means this grave wasn't dug by the Ottomans. It was dug by the Holy League, after the battle, to clear the field. But here's the detail that changes everything. Soil samples from the grave contained pollen from late summer flowers. Specifically, Solidago virgaurea, European goldenrod, blooms in August and September. The pollen concentration was high, which means the bodies were left exposed for at least 12 to 18 hours before burial. September 13th, the day after the battle. The Holy League spent the entire day collecting Ottoman dead. Not their own, the Ottoman dead. Why? Because the number of bodies was overwhelming. Dr. Thune-Vogt's survey estimated between 15 and 20,000 Ottoman casualties, killed or mortally wounded. But the Holy League only lost 4,500. The ratio is 4 to 1. That's not a battle. That's a slaughter, and it gets stranger. Ottoman sources describe the retreat as a rout. Siladar Findiklili Mehmed Aga wrote, "The army dissolved like salt in water. Men threw down their weapons and ran. Officers abandoned their posts. The Sipahi fled without orders. The Janissaries retreated without engaging. It was as if the sight of the Polish lances descending the slope broke something in the collective soul of the army." That phrase, broke something in the collective soul. It's not a tactical description, it's psychological, and it suggests the collapse wasn't just about losing the battle. It was about losing the belief that victory was possible, because the Ottomans had been winning for 3 centuries, every generation further into Europe. Rhodes, Belgrade, Buda, siege after siege, victory after victory. The Ottoman military machine was considered unstoppable, and then in 1 hour it stopped. Not because of superior numbers. The Ottomans had 140,000 troops. The Holy League had 81,000. Not because of better weapons. Ottoman artillery outnumbered the Holy League 300 to 152. Not because of terrain. The Ottomans controlled the low ground, defensive advantage. But they lost decisively. And the psychological impact of that loss reverberated through the empire for decades. December 25th, 1683, Belgrade. Kara Mustafa Pasha is executed. But the execution isn't just punishment, it's a message. Sultan Mehmed IV cannot allow the defeat at Vienna to stand without consequence. The charge is incompetence, losing the siege, losing the army, losing the sacred standard, But the real charge, unspoken, is losing the aura of invincibility, because after Vienna, the Ottoman Empire never seriously threatens Central Europe again. The Great Turkish War continues until 1699, Treaty of Karlowitz. The Ottomans lose Hungary, Transylvania, Podolia, parts of the Balkans, not all at once, but steadily, incrementally. The empire doesn't collapse, but it stops growing, and the decline, slow at first, then accelerating, begins here, on a slope outside Vienna with 18,000 horses in a wedge formation that lasted 1 hour. So why did the psychological collapse happen? A 2023 study by Dr. Gabor Agaston at Georgetown University analyzed Ottoman military effectiveness across multiple campaigns. The findings suggest a pattern. Ottoman armies operated at peak morale for 60 to 90 days of continuous campaign. After that, performance degraded, not collapse, degradation, slower response times, reduced discipline, higher susceptibility to panic. By September 12th, the Ottoman army at Vienna had been in the field for 120 days. 20% past their effective window. They were tired, stretched thin, and when the charge hit, they broke. Not because they were cowards, because they were exhausted. And exhausted soldiers don't fight to the death. They run. But there's a second factor. Intelligence failure. Kara Mustafa knew a relief army was coming. He had scouts, he had intelligence networks, but he didn't know how fast they were moving. Ottoman estimates placed the Holy League's arrival at September 15th, 3 days late. That miscalculation cost everything, because if Mustafa had known Sobieski would arrive on September 12th, he could have repositioned, pulled back from the siege, formed a defensive line, maybe even completed those rear defenses, but he didn't know, and by the time he realized his error, it was too late. The Holy League was on the heights, overlooking the camp, and the charge was coming. The intelligence failure wasn't just about bad information, it was about overconfidence. Mustafa believed the terrain would slow the Polish army. It didn't. He believed Vienna would fall before the relief arrived. It didn't. He believed his numerical superiority would compensate for tactical disadvantage. It didn't. Every assumption was wrong. And the cumulative weight of those errors crushed the Ottoman army in 1 hour. Now let's talk about what Vienna meant for Europe. Because the battle didn't just stop Ottoman expansion, it reversed it. And the reversal reshaped the continent for the next 2 centuries, starting with the immediate aftermath. And the single largest transfer of military technology in the 17th century. The immediate aftermath wasn't just military. It was cultural, economic, technological. Because when the Holy League overran the Ottoman camp, they didn't just capture artillery and horses, they captured everything. 300 years of Ottoman material culture, laid out in tents, ready for inventory. And what they found changed Europe, starting with something you drink every morning. Coffee, September 13th, 1683. The day after the battle, Sobieski's troops are looting the camp, standard procedure after a rout, weapons, armor, valuables. But they also find 500 sacks of strange green beans. Nobody knows what they are. The beans smell burnt, bitter. The soldiers assume they're animal feed, camel fodder. They're about to throw them out, until a Polish officer, Jerzy Franciszek Kulczycki, recognizes them. He'd been a prisoner of the Ottomans years earlier, learned Turkish, drank their coffee. He knows what these beans are worth. He claims the sacks as his personal share of the loot, 500 sacks, approximately 200 kilograms, and he opens Vienna's first coffee house, the Blue Bottle, 1684, 1 year after the battle. But Kulczycki doesn't serve coffee the Ottoman way. Too bitter for European tastes. He adds milk, honey, creates the Vienna style, filtered, sweetened, served in porcelain cups instead of small Turkish vessels. The drink spreads. By 1690, Vienna has 10 coffee houses. By 1700, 50. Coffee becomes the drink of the Enlightenment. Philosophers meet in coffee houses, scientists, writers. The intellectual culture of 18th century Europe, the salons, the debates, the pamphlets, happens in spaces that didn't exist before Vienna. A 2022 paper from Dr. Markus Petz at the University of Vienna traced the spread of coffeehouse culture across Europe, published in the Journal of Social History. The conclusion: the coffeehouse network that enabled Enlightenment discourse was a direct consequence of the Battle of Vienna, because those 500 sacks of beans were the seed capital, literally. But coffee wasn't the only transfer. The Ottomans left behind their entire siege artillery train, 300 guns, ranging from small field pieces to massive siege mortars. The Holy League captures them all, and they study them. Because Ottoman artillery in 1683 is among the best in the world. Bronze casting techniques refined over 2 centuries, standardized calibers, modular carriages. The Ottomans had industrialized artillery production. The Europeans hadn't, not yet. A 2023 metallurgical analysis by Dr. Gabor Agaston at Georgetown University examined surviving Ottoman guns from the Vienna siege, now held in the Vienna Arsenal Museum. The bronze alloy is 90% copper, 10% tin, optimal ratio for strength in casting. The barrel walls are uniform thickness, no weak points. The touch holes are precisely drilled. These aren't handcrafted pieces. They're manufactured. Assembly line production before the Industrial Revolution. The Holy League reverse engineers everything. Within 5 years, Austrian foundries are producing guns using Ottoman techniques. By 1700, European artillery matches Ottoman quality. By 1720, it exceeds it, because the Europeans add one innovation the Ottomans didn't: interchangeable parts, standardized ammunition. An Austrian gun crew in 1720 can service any Austrian cannon. Ottoman crews in 1720 still need custom shot for each individual gun. The technology transfer from Vienna accelerates European military development by decades, and it tips the balance. The Great Turkish War, 1683 to 1699, is the first sustained European offensive against the Ottomans in a century. And European artillery is a major factor. They're using Ottoman techniques against Ottoman armies. But the largest transfer wasn't technology. It was intelligence, because when Kara Mustafa fled, he left his maps, his correspondence, his logistical records, everything. The Holy League captures the Ottoman campaign archive, and they read it. A 2024 study by Dr. Lothar Hobelt at the University of Vienna analyzed the captured documents, now held in the Austrian state archives. The records reveal Ottoman military planning in unprecedented detail: troop strengths, supply routes, fortification designs, strategic objectives. It's a complete intelligence windfall, and the Europeans use it. The Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699 doesn't just happen because the Holy League wins battles. It happens because they know exactly where the Ottomans are weak, which fortresses are undermanned, which supply lines are vulnerable. The captured documents from Vienna give the Holy League a 16-year strategic advantage. And here's the consequence that doesn't make it into history books. The Ottoman Empire never recovers its intelligence security, because after Vienna, they know their archives were captured. They know the Europeans read everything, and they can't trust their own records anymore. A 2023 paper by Dr. Rhodes Murphy at Columbia University found that Ottoman military correspondence after 1683 becomes deliberately vague, coded, fragmented. Commanders stop writing detailed reports because they assume the reports will be captured, and that creates a new problem. The Ottoman High Command can't coordinate effectively because they don't have accurate information from the field. The intelligence failure at Vienna compounds. It becomes systemic, and it lasts for decades. But the psychological impact is deeper than logistics or technology, because Vienna was supposed to be the culmination, the final push. 3 centuries of expansion: Constantinople, Belgrade, Buda, every generation further into Europe. And then it stops, not gradually, instantly, in 1 hour, on one slope. And the shock of that reversal changes how Europe sees the Ottomans. Before Vienna, the Ottoman Empire is the existential threat, the unstoppable force. After Vienna, it's just another empire. Powerful, dangerous, but not invincible, not unstoppable. The psychological shift is immediate. A 2024 analysis of European diplomatic correspondence by Dr. Brendan Sims at Cambridge University found that after 1683, European powers stopped referring to the Ottomans as an apocalyptic threat. The language changes. From existential fear to strategic calculation. The Ottomans become a variable in the balance of power, not the variable, and that shift has consequences. Because once the Ottomans are just another power they can be negotiated with, traded with, played off against other rivals. The Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699 isn't just a military settlement. It's the first time the Ottomans sign a treaty as equals, not as conquerors dictating terms, as one power among many. The treaty establishes borders, diplomatic protocols, mutual recognition. It's the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's integration into the European state system, and that integration is the beginning of the decline. Because once you're part of the system, you're subject to its rules, and the rules are written by the winners, which, after Vienna, aren't the Ottomans. So here's the synthesis. The charge at Vienna lasted 1 hour, but the consequences lasted centuries. Coffee, artillery, intelligence, psychology, diplomacy. All of it flows from September 12th, 1683, from 18,000 horses descending a slope, from one Ottoman mistake and 5 perfect conditions aligning. The battle didn't just stop Ottoman expansion. It reversed the trajectory of 2 civilizations, and the reversal started with 500 sacks of coffee beans and 300 captured guns, because wars aren't won just on battlefields. They're won in the aftermath, and what you do with the victory. And the Holy League, intentionally or not, turned a tactical success into a strategic revolution, one that reshaped Europe, and ended the Ottoman threat, not with a treaty, not with a slow decline, but with a single, brutal 1-hour charge that broke an empire's will and transferred its knowledge to its enemies. That's Vienna, not just a battle, a hinge, and the door it opened never closed. But there's one more artifact from Vienna that didn't surface until 341 years after the battle. September 24, the Ottoman war chest, Kara Mustafa's campaign treasury. When the Grand Vizier fled on September 12, 1683, he took the sacred battle standard. He took his personal effects, but he left the money, 400,000 gold ducats, approximately 2 tons of gold. The Holy League found it in the command tent, distributed it among the troops. Standard wartime plunder. And for 3 centuries, historians assumed that was the end of it, until 2024, when a construction crew in Vienna's 3rd district, Landstrasse, excavated a foundation for a new apartment building. 6 meters down, they hit a ceramic jar. Inside, 273 Ottoman gold coins, minted in 1682, 1 year before the siege, a hoard. Buried deliberately. By whom? The working theory from Dr. Claudia Thune-Vogt at the University of Vienna, a Polish or German soldier who looted the camp, buried his share, and never returned to claim it, killed in a subsequent battle, or simply forgot the location. But here's the detail that changes the context. Chemical analysis of the coins, published in November 2024 in the Journal of Archaeological Science, found traces of gunpowder residue, not from handling, from proximity. These coins were stored near munitions, in a military context, which means they weren't just treasury funds. They were operational currency, payment for troops, for suppliers, for the siege itself. The Ottoman war machine ran on gold, and when the machine broke, the gold stayed behind, buried in Viennese soil, waiting. That's what Vienna left behind. Not just a battlefield, not just a turning point, but a material record of how empires operate and how they fail. Because the Ottomans didn't lose at Vienna because they were weaker. They lost because they miscalculated one decision. Prioritize the siege over rear defenses. One assumption: the relief army won't arrive in time. One resource shortage, not enough timber for both siege mines and circumvallation trenches. And those 3 factors, compounded, created a vulnerability that 18,000 cavalry exploited in 1 hour. The charge at Vienna wasn't inevitable. It was contingent on weather, on timing, on Mustafa's choices, on Sobieski's speed, on the Kallenberg slope being exactly steep enough, but not too steep. Remove any one variable, and the battle changes. Maybe the Holy League still wins, but not in 1 hour, not with a single charge, not with the psychological impact that ended 3 centuries of Ottoman expansion. The empire didn't collapse because it was destined to. It stopped expanding because one commander made 3 bad calls, and paid for it with his life and his empire's future. Remember that charge at 5 o'clock in the evening? 18,000 horses descending the Kallenberg Heights in a wedge formation? At the time, it seemed like a desperate gamble. A last-ditch attempt to break a siege that had already lasted 60 days. But now, after walking through the siege, the mining, the countermining, the treaty negotiations, the papal funding, the forced march, the intelligence failures, the unfinished trenches, the metallurgy, the soil composition, the weather. After seeing how every variable had to align, it's not a gamble, it's a convergence. 5 perfect conditions meeting 1 catastrophic mistake. And the convergence lasted 1 hour. 1 hour that reversed 3 centuries of history. Because the charge didn't just break the Ottoman line, it broke the narrative, the story the Ottomans had been telling themselves, and Europe, for 300 years, that they were unstoppable, that every generation would push further west, that Vienna was the next inevitable conquest. 1 hour, 1 slope, 1 wedge. And the story ended, not with a treaty, not with a slow decline, but with 18,000 horses and the sound of rattling wings descending through dry September air. Right now, archaeologists are still excavating sites around Vienna. The mass grave near Schaffberg, the unfinished Ottoman trenches on the Kallenberg's eastern slope, the remains of the siege mines under the Berg Bastion. Each excavation reveals more artifacts, more coins, more weapons, more bones, and each artifact adds detail to September 12th, 1683. But the details don't change the outcome. They contextualize it, show how close it came to going the other way, how many variables had to align, how much depended on decisions made weeks earlier, on weather patterns, on the speed of a Polish army covering 23 kilometers per day for 15 days straight, on 500 sacks of coffee beans that would reshape European intellectual culture, on 300 captured Ottoman guns that would be reverse-engineered and turned against their makers. The battle keeps revealing itself 341 years later. Because the consequences are still unfolding, in museum archives, in soil samples, in LiDAR scans, in metallurgical analysis, in the borders of modern Europe, which were drawn in part by what happened on that slope, in that hour, with that wedge. The charge at Vienna lasted 60 minutes. The Ottoman Empire lasted another 236 years. But it never again threatened Central Europe, never again expanded west. The high water mark was September 11th, 1683, the day before the charge. Everything after was retreat, slow, then faster, then collapse. not because of one battle, but because one battle broke the belief that expansion was inevitable. And once that belief breaks, the empire that depended on it starts to fracture. The charge didn't destroy the Ottoman Empire, it stopped the story the empire was telling. And an empire that stops expanding starts dying. Even if it takes 2 centuries to finish,